You're listening to the World Food Prize Podcast, dialogue that feeds the world. Twice a month, we bring you inspiring conversations with the leaders, innovators, and changemakers working to increase food and nutrition security. From groundbreaking research to global initiatives, we explore the ideas and actions driving food and nutrition security, sustainability, and opportunity for all. Join us as we uncover solutions, share stories, and work toward a more food and nutrition secure future. The Wellmark Foundation is proud to present the World Food Prize Podcast as part of our commitment to improving the health of all Iowans and South Dakotans. Access to nutritious food is essential for living a long, healthy life, and this partnership underscores the importance of advancing a food and nutrition secure future for all. Please welcome Howard W. Buffett and Barrett Ersek, and your host, World Food Prize Foundation CEO, Tom Vilsack.
Welcome to episode 2 of the World Food Prize podcast. Consistent with our mission, we continue to spotlight solutions that advance global food and nutrition security. Today's conversation focuses on a resource that quite literally underpins it all, the health of our soils. Advancing soil health requires leadership that bridges science, investment, and on-the-ground agricultural practice. And I'm pleased to be joined by two leaders doing exactly that. Howard W. Buffett, Chair of the Advisory Board at Holganix, and Barrett Ersek, CEO of Holganix. Howard, a professor at Columbia University and author of Social Value Investing, has worked across philanthropy, public policy, and global development to mobilize capital for sustainable impact. Barrett leads Holganix and its environmental assets platform, HGX, helping translate soil science into practical, field-ready solutions for farmers. An experienced entrepreneur with 3 patents, he has built and successfully exited 2 other green industry companies. Together, they are advancing science-based innovation and cross-sector collaboration to strengthen resilience and build more sustainable food systems. I'm delighted to welcome Howard and Barrett to the podcast. Howard and Barrett, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We're excited about the conversation we're going to have today and anxious to hear all about Holganix and the work that you all are doing there. Howard, let me start off right off the bat, thinking about this, knowing that I was going to have the opportunity to visit with you. When your last name is Buffett, the reality is you could do quite a few things actually with your time and your resources, but you've chosen this as an area of focus and of attention. I guess the question is, why?
Well, I appreciate the question very much so. So thank you. First of all, thank you, Governor Vilsack, for having us on and to your whole team. It's an honor to do this. A little known fact is that you were one of my very first bosses that I ever had when I was at the Department of Agriculture. So I've always looked up to you and seen you as a mentor. So thank you for having us. To answer your question, I've always had a pretty simple motto in life that the world can be a much better place than it is today. And that really everyone in every sector of our economy can play a part in realizing a better future. And I think I came to that from maybe 2 very distinct sets of experiences when I was younger. The first was growing up farming. That was just a very important thing. We had a farm north of Omaha that I'd go up to every weekend with my dad, and 400 acres, corn and soy rotation, as you might expect. And, we had one other person that helped us on that farm. And so, we really worked the land and we did a lot of that. And I would say from that young age, that really helped illustrate to me the value of stewardship and how important it is to take care of the land and to be part of a community and to know that we are all playing a part in a much bigger picture of what's going on around us. Again, that could be the local level, but it can also expand to the global level. So that was one thing. The second thing for me is that growing up, starting around the age of 12, we started traveling internationally. And I come from a very fortunate family. I have a grandfather and a grandmother who were extremely philanthropic and very giving, and my grandfather still is today. And what that meant was that my father had a bit of a remit to steward some of those resources into ways that he thought he could make the world a better place too. And so part of that was going to some of the hardest conditions globally to see where we could make a difference, what was working, what wasn't working. And really, we were working among some of the world's most impoverished populations. And doing that from the age of sort of 12 to 20 gives anyone, but in this case me, a very distinct view on life. I think we might have traveled to 60 different countries, in those 8 years alone, really getting exposed to what parts of the world needed our help and ways that we could try and make a big difference in doing that. So I would say a combination of those two things, and then maybe the final thing I'll say tying this to Holganix specifically is when you meet people who have a sense of passion and inspiration and leadership around the work that they're doing, and when that also happens to align with making the world a better place, it's hard not to sort of catch that bug and go with it. And so, when I met and got to know Barrett and his team and the other folks who were involved in Holganix, it felt like such a natural fit for me to do this work that I feel like we're at the beginning of the journey. But, as they say, every long journey begins with a single step. We're kind of at step number one from my view. Barrett's been at this a lot longer, but I'm really excited for kind of what's ahead in the future.
Guys, when I took a look at the name of your company and the enterprise, my first inclination was it sounded like a villain against Spider-Man or the Hulk. So can you tell me a little bit about the name? I mean, it's very interesting. It's an interesting play on words and sounds. Tell me a little bit about how you came to this name of this venture.
Yeah. So when I started really experimenting with how do we build soil health and microbiology to help growers use less inputs, help them have a better output of whether it be yield or plant health, we started to really understand the circular nature of microbial communities, the soil, and the plants, and how it was just really a virtuous cycle. So it seemed to me it was a holistic process when you think about how the entire system works, from the soil to the roots to the plant, and how the microbes play an integral part of keeping that holistic cycle going. So I started saying, well, this is holistic. That's what it's all about. It's holistic, but that's too generic. So it's also organic, and so a lot of our customers are more conventional in their agricultural approaches. We don't only work on organic farms, but organic farms, we are organic certified. So that's a nice opportunity for us. So it's organic, it's holistic. And so I kind of put those words, it's Holganix. And so I just kind of just kind of came to me. We put the X on the end so that we could seem like a technology company, and make it, and we could get the domain Holganix.com. So making up our own word helped with the domain, but that's kind of, as I was thinking about it, that was my how my mind was working. It's a holistic organic approach to healthy plants and healthy soils.
How did the two of you intersect, or where, and what were the circumstances that you got to know Howard, and Howard, you got to know Barrett?
We have an unlikely mutual friend, and that's the famous entrepreneur Richard Branson. And Richard's a huge supporter of Holganix. He just wrote a piece about the work we're doing and the importance of soil health. And so with Richard, and then the chair of our board, John Ratliff, we came together over just this need that we saw for easily scalable solutions that can really address the health of our planet. And in fact, the first time Barrett and I met in person, because we spent a lot of time over Zoom, was at a dinner with Richard, and it was a small Holganix dinner during Climate Week. And it was a really great opportunity. We had brought a couple of our key farmers who are really wonderful sort of brand ambassadors for us almost, to come and sit down in a very small group setting and talk to Richard about the work that we were doing. And from there, I feel like, Barrett, I see you every day now. So I don't know if I'm leaving anything out, but I think that's really kind of how we first came together.
Yeah, that's how we first met. And I got to tell you, when John had suggested that we consider how we could work with Howard on kind of our mission, that he was excited about it. I have to tell you, it put butterflies in my stomach, because I had certainly done research on your dad before we ever met, and knew about his book, and then as soon as I heard that you could be interested in this, I started learning more about you. And I mean, you got to pinch me that I've got people like Richard Branson and Howard Buffett helping to advise us on our mission. It's a pretty exciting place to be.
Well, one of the reasons I was interested in having you folks on the podcast is that your mission is also very much aligned with the World Food Prize Foundation's mission. We want to elevate innovation, and innovation specifically that addresses the need for a continued increase in productivity, the increased quality, the affordability, the accessibility, and sustainability of food for all, that provides food and nutrition security for all. So I think it is important for us to have this conversation, and it's interesting, Barrett, that you mentioned a system, because I think Howard's kind of written a book on the system, so based on his work at Columbia. Very interesting way of connecting the mission with performance standards, with people, with the resources, and I was struck by a quote that I saw recently attributed to Howard, which I think really sort of summarizes what you all are doing. And I'm going to use this quote as sort of the basis of this podcast. And the quote is just simply this. Howard said, "Regeneration is an operating system that aligns biology, finance, and leadership to grow climate, water, and food resilience together at scale." That is one sentence with a whole lot of meaning. So let's break it down. Let's begin with the notion of an operating system, and I think, Barrett, you began that by mentioning the system in your response to the previous question. What is this operating system? What does it look like? What are its components?
So if you think about, so first of all, if I want to start, kind of zoomed in like a microscope, that leads you to that Holganix statement that I mentioned before, a holistic organic approach to healthy soils and healthy plants. By getting the soil microbiome, optimally balanced. It's the soil is the stomach to the plant. It's no different than, human gut biome. Everybody kind of has, I think, learned about that at this point. Well, if we start to think about the soil being the stomach to the plant, we've got to get the biome right there as well if we want healthy plants. As healthy as they can be, and with as little help from chemistry as possible. Getting that biome in check is important. So there's a system approach in that piece, all the way down to a microscope, and we could talk about each microbe and what they do and how they support each other, and how you need a large consortium. It's not a single microbe that solves the problem. We use over 800 species, in fact, of bacteria, fungi, amoeba, protozoa. They're all working together in that system approach. But then if you want to zoom out on a larger scale and think about our business and our business model, we're not just a microbial input for farmers to help drive soil health through microbes. Yes, that is one of the mechanisms that of what we do, and it's one of our proprietary pieces of technology. However, we don't think it's enough to just provide an input. We want to help the farmer also measure the results of what they're getting, and understand the results. So that they can make educated decisions on things like fertilizer reductions, on where and when they may or may not need to use fungicides, what genetics of corn or beans that they need in a certain farm based on how their field, based on how it's performing. And so we do a lot of soil testing for our farmers. We do it as part of our service. We then take information from the farmers' telematics, from their telematics platform, from their tractor, which tells us about what's as applied information of everything that's being applied to the field, and we combine that with aerial components that we use with satellite imagery, and it gives us a bunch of analysis from the sky. So we take the below ground, the tractor telematics, and above ground. We combine all of this information into a portal we call Horizons, and it really gives the farmer or the grower insights into each field and how they're responding because we want to be not just selling a product to the farmer, but we want to be a partner to the farmer in helping them drive soil health. And to be a true partner, we have to help them measure and understand results. We have to take all these measurements, and we built this web portal that allows them to do that. And then one of the byproducts of doing all this measurement is we can also help farmers understand that as they build the functionality of their soil down to building fungal networks to go deep into the soil that weren't previously there before they went to a Holganix approach, we start to see carbon that gets sequestered by the plant and goes deep into the soil. And we're measuring significant amounts of new carbon that's sequestered on these fields that are running these regenerative processes. We're able to measure it and prove it and quantify it, and then ultimately help the farmer sell that asset in the form of a carbon credit as an additional revenue stream for the farm. So that entire system approach of healthy soil, healthy plants, digital measurement tool, and then another revenue stream for the farmer is really key. And then we're laying in some finance mechanisms as well to help accelerate that even more.
So Howard, that was a pretty comprehensive answer, but
Yeah, very little that I could add. But I think what's so helpful about Barrett is that this is a very tangible example of what's taking place right now. So that if I speak in maybe slightly more generic terms or from a framework perspective, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. So I think, Barrett, what you outlined perfectly there is we have to think about systems change at scale. And in order to do that, from my view, you have to have a framework that you're building from, right? That all of your partners can adapt to and adopt as they're going forward. Because a lot of what Barrett just described is everything from your equipment manufacturers to the farmers themselves to maybe folks who are selling certain inputs, dealers, all the way up to a global scale of carbon markets potentially, and other vendors you're using for satellite imagery. There are a lot of actors that have to work together in concert in order to make that successful. And so the way we think about this, and the way that I've developed a bit of the research that I do, is around a 5-point framework that really drives effective collaboration, and that's what's so important. And so there's 5 points to it. The first one is the process that's used. So that's how decisions are made across partners, how work moves between them, how learning feeds back into action, and then how you have shared processes that reduce friction between the different groups, right? Because you may be speaking different languages, you may have different subtle priorities and so on. The second one that's critical about this is around people. And so that's, what are the different incentives and the different time horizons people are operating under? Are there clear roles and governance in place between the different actors, trust and accountability, right? They say that everything in life moves at the speed of trust, and that's so critical to us at Holganix. And then also kind of who makes what decisions, who bears the risk, and who shares in the benefits, right? Which is one critical part for us, especially as we talk about the different carbon-related payments to farmers, because if the growers aren't at the front of receiving benefit from this, then we would have failed. So I think that's critical. The third is what I call place, right? We've got kind of local, physical, and ecological context to the work that we're doing, but there's also social and institutional realities depending on the communities we're working in. As we think about working in other countries, that changes significantly. And some things that work in one place may not work in the other. So we have the farm in Tacoma and Nebraska, and that's different than the farm that I then helped farm in central Illinois, right? They're both corn and soybean farms. They're both agriculture, but they're different communities. They're different values, priorities, other things. And so it's important to know that scaling requires adaptation and not just uniformity. So that's really important. The fourth is what I call portfolio. And so that is that no single solution or bet can solve everything. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And you want to have different initiatives working together. And that's part of this operating system approach that Barrett just talked about. Is we're not doing just one thing. We've got the engine, we have the data visibility and analytics, we've got the value driver for farmers, and then we have all the partners in that ecosystem around it, which also allows us to balance things like experimentation and durability, and to spread risk and value over time, which is really, really important. And we're working on something exciting about that right now. Now, last thing is what I call performance. Probably not surprising, but how do we know when things are working? What are outcomes we're driving towards and not just activities? And how can short-term progress tie into long-term value so that impact compounds over time? And as Barrett knows, I love the performance management space. They always say you can't manage what you can't measure. I also say whatever you're measuring is where you're putting your money behind as well. And so you better be measuring the right thing and getting good data and having that drive, again, that full learning process I mentioned at the very beginning of this. So to me, in a bit of a summary, these are these 5 key elements that are designed together and that helps collaboration be more long lasting. I would say if one of them is missing, the system becomes a bit more fragile. And so you could think of them sort of as a checklist. It's a little bit more than that. It's sort of how to see if the operating system is complete and in a place that it will be sustainable over time, which is really important. So I'll pause there, but that's how we bring these 2 very different but completely congruent views of operating system together, which so far, and I don't want to speak for Barrett, but feels like it's been, to use your word, Tom, a great marriage.
So, does this work for just row crops, or can it work for fruit and vegetable production, or is it located? You mentioned the Midwestern farms. Is that where it works, or is it something that's applicable throughout the United States? You mentioned other countries. Maybe tell me a little bit about place in terms of where you are and what your expectations are in terms of growth and development.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking it. So first of all, anything that grows in the soil, we can help it grow better by getting the microbiome in check. There are slightly different formulations for different crops in different regions, but we frankly started off in the turfgrass space. So sod farms, lawn care, golf course, sports turf. That's where we started to start to really pioneer this technology around soil health, microbes, and plant health. And frankly, it was around the Chesapeake Bay watershed because there was a lot of press around fertilizer runoff into the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and the lawn care companies and the golf courses were getting regulated because they're frankly, in some cases, over applying fertilizer in areas that would be sensitive to the bay. And so we started this company with the mission of how can we create green healthy plants and turfgrass and still have clean water. How can we put those two things together? That was the beginning thesis. It's certainly evolved into agriculture as our real driver today. We still have a turfgrass, customer base that we value a lot, but agriculture is what's driving scale today. And my original ag plan was to go to specialty crop. We had a bunch of trial work that we'd done at a bunch of universities in row crop and in various specialty crop, and we saw this big value drive that we're creating in specialty crop. So we thought that was where we were going to enter the market. But you go where the market takes you. We were fortunate to have some early investors that were in row crop in Iowa, and they brought us out to their farms in corn and beans. We knew we did good things for corn and beans, but we just didn't see that as the market to start, but that was where the customer took us. And through early success there, it just spread. And today it's probably 85% corn, soy, cotton, wheat, and then 15% just about everything else you can think about.
Well, I know a few farmers. I've run across them from time to time in my future life or my past life. Is what I know about farmers. You have to prove it to them. You mentioned trust. You have to prove it to them before they're bought in. So how did you sell this to a skeptical, or how would you sell it to a skeptical farmer here, or for that matter, anywhere in the world? What's the hook? How do you sell it?
Yeah, well, so it is in the early days. It was an adoption curve that we were trying to push through, and it was frankly frustrating, because it took us an entire growing season to prove to a farmer that it worked on. If he had 5,000 acres, he'd give us 500 acres, and we'd have to prove ourselves on 500, and then he might give us 1,000, and then he might give us 1,500. Now we're 3 years into this. I've proven it to him 3 years in a row in 3 different growing seasons, and now maybe I get the whole farm. And so that's fine. I understand the risk-averse nature of a farmer and why they might take us up that way, especially in the early years when we didn't have a lot of ground to compare to. But once we got to, I'd say we started crossing 1 million acres and of treated ground that was within a geography of, let's just say, 4 or 5 states in the Midwest that would be, the I states and some of the surrounding. We started to have enough referenceable, kind of success that we could have customers tell stories for us. One of the things we did at Governor Vilsack, and it really influenced our entire business model and our go-to-market strategy. Internally, we would say we want to be seen as the most trusted brand in agriculture. Now, that's a big statement, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've quantified that we are that, but we make decisions with that filter. And microbial technologies have been, associated with some really good technology, and there's been some, I would say that farmers have said, if it's not snake oil, it's weasel piss. They definitely have put us in the bucket of, I'm not sure it's real stuff. And so to build trust in a technology that was emerging and new and not fully understood, and where there had been some noise around some maybe overclaims that some other companies had made in the early years, we really wanted to put our data where our mouth was. So we would tell customers, let us come out and do free soil testing for you. Let us show you not just yield improvement, because you can measure that yourself with your weigh wagon or your yield monitor, but let's go below the ground And beyond yield, let's show you what else we're doing. We're doing root development. We're improving your availability of nutrients. We're improving your CECs. We're improving organic matter. And once we could show them all those soil health metrics and then explain the implications of that and how they could actually reduce fertilizer even more the following year, how their yields would go up the following year, the data would tell the story for us. And fundamentally, from the very beginning, Governor Vilsack, what I said, not just to be the most trusted brand in agriculture, but if we can't help a farmer make more money the first year they use us, then we don't belong on that farm. And so, in this market where it's challenging to be a farmer, let's face it, if we can help show them and prove to them that we can make them more money, then we can be their partner, and that we're in it for them. And we'll refund their invoice if it doesn't work that way.
So there's a cost involved, but you save on fertilizer. That's one
right.
way of improving the bottom line. You mentioned potentially participating in carbon credits, carbon markets. That's an income source. What other benefits, either financial or otherwise, accrue to farmers who participate in a program that really focuses below the ground and trying to improve things and how they work below the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you look at building this healthy soil, the first thing we say to the farmers, trust us on the data. We know where to start with the fertilizer reductions. We can help guide you to a safe place on using less fertilizer. That'll pay for the product usually right up front. We then typically get a yield bump at the end of the year. That's money in their pocket. That's pretty simple. But then we go below the ground and we start to measure all of the benefits that are happening in their soil. The average farm we go out to day one is probably a 95% bacterial dominant, 5% fungi. Super healthy soil should be 50-50 bacteria fungi. We've reversed that over the last 40 years of conventional agriculture and some of the practice we've done to push yield. We're able to come in with our consortiums and start to rebuild that fungal network and get it more balanced. Might not get to 50-50, but we can get it to 70-30, 60-40. And as that starts to happen, we can then correlate that to a lot better efficiency on fertilizers, a much better more resiliency in the plant. One thing that's really clear is the organic matter goes up in the soil. So if we could take somebody from 2% organic matter to 3% organic matter, and we'll see that often in 2 seasons. Not you can't say guarantee it's always happening in 2 seasons, but often we'll see it in 2 seasons. 1% organic matter improvement gives that soil an additional 25,000 gallons per acre of water holding capacity. So you think about that, and you think about the fickleness of our weather and how it's become so unpredictable. When a farmer says, "Hey, how much rain did you get?" Every conversation with a farmer starts with the weather, right? So if you're getting ready to talk to a conversation, first thing I do is check the weather in that local area and say, "Hey, how'd the rain? How much rain did you get yesterday?" And I'm looking at their weather report, and when they say, "I got all of it because I'm using Holganix," they could see it percolate into the soil. That puts goosebumps on my back. And so that's just a summary of a couple of the benefits. If we had more time, I could give you more.
It's either prices or the price of corn and soybeans here. That might trump weather from time to time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, these days.
Time of year.
Yeah.
Howard, your quote, we sort of touched on the biology of this and the finance of this, but your quote also places an emphasis on leadership. How does that fit into this process, and how does it fit in, frankly, in terms of agriculture generally, of the necessity of the leadership of agriculture to understand the importance of continued evolution if we're going to basically produce enough and produce it sustainably to feed everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing about leadership in general is it's having the discipline to continue to think long term, even when you're faced with some severe short term choices and challenges that are in front of you. And I think what we've seen with soil and soil management over the last few decades is the fact that many of us in this space talk about how we feel like we're marching towards a cliff, and that, to Barrett's earlier point, the drop in soil organic matter and the drop in the overall fertility of our soil over time, it's a tough issue because my dad likes to say it's like the treads on your tire, right? It's wearing down slowly, but you don't really see it happening. And so I think part of what, at least I've been witnessing over the last few years, is a rise in the recognition and space that soil and soil health has received in the global narrative, and more individuals willing to step up and talk about this. This is happening even in conventional media, which I think is important. And so you've got that's one angle of what's going on. When I think about another angle of leadership, it's also realizing that sometimes in society we can default towards picking heroes and villains. And, in this case, to me, sometimes the farmer gets miscategorized. And that really, to me, the hero of this story and, saving the future of our soil and our ability to feed a hungry planet, to do so in a sustainable way, starts with the farmer and ends with the farmer. I mean, I think that's very, very clear. And I have seen more and more folks being willing to step up and say that as well, even if it maybe is in a room where it would be considered unpopular. And then maybe the last layer to this, I'll say, is, to me, leadership is oftentimes about inspiring people to want to do the things they don't even know need to get done. And I think that when we talk about the importance of conservation and soil and our global systems, there's a whole lot of things that people don't even know to get done, but they do. And part of what we need to do is inspire them to want to do those things, not necessarily follow us, but for us to lead them to want to lead towards those realizations and outcomes themselves. And then the last little piece I have to throw in here, just because it's personal, is one of the favorite quotes of my grandfather's that I'll paraphrase is that you want to surround yourself with people who push you to be better and to do better, and that you will inevitably rise to their expectations and meet those demands. And I think another component of leadership is knowing that there's a whole lot you don't know as an individual, knowing that if you're actually the least smart person in a room, that's fantastic. And to put people around you that may not always agree with you, hopefully they maintain a level of civility, but that they will push you to do what they believe is the right thing, and that you'll have a healthy debate around that as well. And so I know those all kind of sound a little disjointed, but to me they kind of all represent this broader sensibility and set of values around leadership that I have seen moving, at least in the agricultural community and around soil health and the environment, shifting in the right direction. That I hope part of what I can do with Holganix and pick up some megaphones here and there is to just really keep driving attention towards the really critical and important issue that soil health is, and how it plays such an important role in our global ecology as well.
The first time I met your grandfather, it was a fundraising event when I was running for a re-election. And I was candidly scared to death meeting this guy. I mean, read about him, heard about him, pretty big deal. First time I'd ever met somebody like this. And so I was trying to figure out what I was going to say to him. And I walk up to your grandfather and he looks at me and he says, "Do you know who the bat boy was for the 1927 Yankees?" And I looked at him like, that is not what I expected our first conversation to be. And I said, "No, sir, I have no idea." I said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, I've got to call into the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown to find this out." He said, "Because if you think about it, this is the guy who handed the bat to Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and all of these great baseball players." He said, to a certain extent, he said, "That's kind of how I see myself. I don't hit the home runs. I just hand the bat to the people that do." It sounds to me like that's kind of what you're doing here with farmers. You're not the farmer. You're not the person who's actually going to put the crop in the ground and harvest it, but you're basically giving the farmer the bat to hopefully hit the home run of healthier soil and more resilience in terms of water retention, biodiversity, and things of that nature. So our time is just about up. Let me just ask a last question about hope, because you mentioned in your quote scale, and it seems to me that essentially that requires a bit of hope when you talk about taking something that's an idea where you might have a handful of farmers operating, and then you get maybe a few more. Are you hopeful? Do you think it will scale? And what is it going to take to scale it?
Mm-hmm. I'll kick it off and then I'll give it over to Barrett because he'll be far more eloquent. First of all, if I can be the bat boy to every farmer globally, sign me up. I'm there. So Secretary Vilsack, Governor Vilsack, thank you for that anecdote. I think it's quite telling and also very useful, and also imparts a sense of humility that I think is really critical for leadership as well. I am an inherently optimistic person. I wake up with the view that I can make a difference every day. I have another personal motto, which is that doing good does not excuse us from doing better. And to me, that means if I can help others to effectuate the most effective and as you said, scalable change out in the world as they are capable of doing and they have the potential to do so, then I will have done my job. And there's a concept I'm sure plenty of folks have heard about, but it's called a trim tab. And I think from aviation, the trim tab is the teeny little piece of the flap on the wing or the airloin that when you adjust it a little bit in one direction, it pushes the entire flap the other direction. And you can see how making a minute change to something that's a bigger piece of a system can completely shift the direction and the ultimate destination of where that system is moving towards. And so the optimism that I have is that I may be just one very, very small part of that system. But if I can be the trim tab, if I can be the bat boy, I know I'm doing my part. And if I just keep trying, even on days that are hard, and think about the future and what that holds and the better planet that I want to leave future generations, then I'll keep finding the energy to keep doing it. So that's my hope. Now, Barrett, please tell us what that means for Holganix as well.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, so I can remember some of the early days board meetings where we weren't quite hitting our budget numbers. And, I was getting some pushback from the board because we weren't, meeting expectations at some level. And I looked at them, I said, no, guys, you don't get it. And we were just starting the agriculture part of our business. I said, and I was asking to, invest more money in agriculture. I said, you guys don't get it. Our vision is brighter than ever. It's just a little further away than we thought. And I will tell you internally now, we're growing at such a rate. The company is, we're 200 to 300% a year in growth. And we're getting some significant acres and great customers, great partners. And now internally we say the vision is brighter than ever. It's just a little closer than we thought. So the hope is building. But I will tell you that, as I think about hope and I think about creating a movement and creating, change to our systems, maybe planetary, by helping fix soil and drive this microbiome effect. I think about this concept of flow, and one of our core values within Holganix is called flow, and we talk about how to get into a state of flow, how the company can be in a state of flow, how we can create more flow. But if you think about flow, just think about a stream, and you got a little babbling brook. That's one, that's a flow of water. If you can join a few streams together, you turn into maybe something that starts to be a small river. Eventually, you keep adding more bodies of water, and you can get something that's maybe the size of an ocean current. And an ocean current is unstoppable. You might be able to stop that stream with a few rocks and a dam, but you're not going to stop an ocean current. And I think the best way to increase flow within this space is to align create this compelling vision that we can actually clean our planet and feed our planet by fixing topsoil and using the microbiome to do that. That's the compelling vision. And then getting others aligned in that vision to join in the flow. And then you start to get powerful people like Sir Richard Branson and Howard Buffett, and a couple of thousand farmers and growing to much, much more. The flow keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I do think that as we keep getting people joining that flow, it will become unstoppable. And getting everybody aligned in that common vision is what I think really helps us do it.
Our World Food Prize laureate last year, Dr. Guerra, basically believed in biologics and the capacity of that to really fundamentally change profitability for farmers and also sustainability and productivity. And by virtue of her receiving the award, she's now spreading the gospel, if you will, of this. And so I think there are a lot of currents, a lot of streams that are finding their way towards that river that you're trying to build, ultimately in that ocean wave. So, listen, we could talk about this for a long time. We just barely, literally scratched the surface here, but enough to give people a sense of what's going on. Really appreciate, Barrett, really appreciate your time. Howard, thank you so much for being part of this. And we look forward to continued conversations about the important role of regeneration as an operating system, as Howard suggested, and looking forward to reaching that day when the scale is large enough that it fundamentally does amazing things for farmers, ranchers, producers, and for all of us who are concerned about food security for all. Thank you all.
Thank you for listening to the World Food Prize podcast. If today's conversation inspired you, we invite you to take the next step by making a gift You help support dialogue like this, elevate innovative solutions, give voice to science, and invest in the next generation of leaders working to end hunger. Visit worldfoodprize.org to donate, learn more, and get involved. Together, through dialogue and action, we can sustainably feed the world.